Hi there, everybody. It is Tuesday, the 10th of March, 2026. I'm Nate Eaton. Welcome to Courtroom Insider. Thanks for watching today, day 11 of Kouri Richins' trial. I don't know if you can even call it a day. It was a few hours, but interesting stuff. We're going to talk about it. I know a lot of you have questions about what happened today in the courtroom, and we'll explain it all here and then let you know what you can expect tomorrow. Also, coming up in just a few minutes, an interview with a woman who probably knows courts better than anybody, has been to more trials more than anybody. Grace Wong with Court TV, who we have worked with over the years, covering trials, Daybell and others. She has been with Court TV since the 90s. And then Court TV went away and then it came back. She came back, helped launch it. She's been in the Richins trial every single day for this week and for this more than this week for this trial. And she has some really fascinating insights to share about what she has observed about Kouri, about the defense, about the prosecution. So stay tuned for that. We'll have that in just a moment. But first, let's talk about what happened today. If you're new here, please, by the way, let us know where you're watching from. If you have any questions, and go ahead and subscribe to our channel if you haven't. Would love for you to subscribe so that you can keep up to date. Kouri Richins, Utah mother of three, accused of killing her husband, poisoning him with fentanyl back in March of 2022. Also accused of forgery and insurance fraud. She has been on trial, facing life in prison if convicted, since, well, we're in week 3 now. So a little over 3 weeks ago, the trial started. She has 3 defense attorneys. The state has 3 prosecutors working the case. This has been in the works for years. The trial is happening in Park City, Utah. The prosecution has called 40 or so witnesses. Let me pull up the exact number. We have heard from, let's see, it started February 23rd. Pulling up my notes here. So far, we have heard from 41, 42, 43, 43 witnesses over the last 2.5 weeks. Prosecution is nearing its end. We know that they have at least one more witness to call, Lieutenant Detective O'Driscoll. He has been the lead investigator on this case for the past 1.5 years or so. He was not always the lead. We heard from the other lead yesterday, who is now a canine officer. So O'Driscoll is going to testify, was supposed to testify today, but I don't want to say a technical issue came up because it's actually quite an important issue. An evidentiary issue came up. Carmen Lauber testified almost, well, 2 weeks ago. Carmen Lauber is the woman who worked for Kouri Richins and Kouri Richins' family cleaning homes. Carmen Lauber testified that before Eric died and one time after he died, Kouri contacted her asking for drugs, street drugs, painkillers, not like cocaine or meth, but painkillers, pills. Carmen Lauber testified that she went from the Heber area, Camas area, down the mountain and met up with a man named Robert Crozier 2 or 3 or maybe 4, depending on the recollection, 4 times, 3 times, 2 times at the Maverick gas station in Draper, Utah, and collected these pills. And one of the times that she got these pills, Eric Richins, Kouri's husband, died within a few days of her gathering those pills, and that Kouri Richins had asked her, Carmen, to get something stronger. Carmen has a background, an extensive criminal background, and has been charged multiple times and was in jail within a matter of when the police charged Kouri with Eric's death. Police went to Carmen and said, you have information, cooperate with us, in so many words they said this, and you will get immunity. Carmen said, okay, I will. In fact, she at one point apparently said, you write down everything I need to say and I'll sign it. And they said, that's not how it works. So there were questions raised by the defense about the authenticity of her testimony. And when she was on the stand, the defense pointed that out and pointed out that her story had changed from when she was on the stand now, from when she spoke with investigators a few years ago. They pulled up the transcripts of the jailhouse interviews from years ago versus what she said on the stand now. And they basically said the only reason you are talking and testifying and going against Kouri is because you're getting immunity and you're out of jail. You get a jail out of free, the deal of a lifetime, they said. So this all came up a few weeks ago. You can go back and watch all of her testimony. Robert Crozier, the dealer, the drug dealer who got the pills and gave them to Carmen, and then Carmen gave them to Kouri, he testified too. Kind of also in the same boat. He was given immunity. Both of their attorneys came to court. They have separate attorneys when they testified. Sir, do you know and now the prosecution, before their case in chief ends, before they rest, they want to admit the jailhouse conversations that Carmen had with the detectives. They want to admit around 100 pages. They basically, the defense is accusing the prosecution of cherry-picking statements to make it look like Carmen's story is solid. Because they want to rehabilitate the witness, they call it. They want to make sure that what she said, the jurors understand that she wasn't lying, because her testimony, she's a key witness here. So the prosecution knows that the jury has to understand that she wasn't lying, and the story, in the grand scheme of things, the story is true. So the prosecution this morning, well, a couple of days ago, even weeks ago, made a motion to admit these jailhouse interviews to the jury, and they want to admit them through this witness, Detective O'Driscoll, because O'Driscoll conducted many of these interviews. And they're saying we can admit him through him because he did the interviews. The defense came back and said, no, you can't. You need to recall Carmen. They should have been admitted through her, so then we could have cross-examined her. So that's kind of where it stands now. I want to play a little bit from both sides. First, here's what the prosecution argued this morning.
Those 100 or so pages, narrowly tailored, are kind of the minimal amount to show the motive, Carmen Lauber's motive, that it was more, certainly there was a self-serving piece, but there was a lot more than a self-serving piece, and that she was not motivated by detectives O'Driscoll and Maynard bullying her.
Right.
I think the full expanded 900 pages show that the best. I think the 100 or so we culled to show it enough.
Do you have these as one kind of video clip that plays from interview to interview, or will you provide some signposts for the jury as you introduce them?
Your Honor, we don't intend to publish them. We intend to make a few points from them through Detective O'Driscoll's testimony, provide them to the jury, and in argument argue something like, you heard the defense cross-examine Carmen Lauber. You heard Detective O'Driscoll's testimony regarding those interviews. You have them before you if you want to, or you have these excerpts before you if you want to dig through them and determine for yourself what the evidence proves.
Okay. I appreciate the efficiency of this. I have a genuine question as to whether I can send these transcripts back into the jury room when I'm not sending other transcripts of other testimony back into the jury room. I have some
Your Honor, it's not testimony. It's
Oh.
It's evidence. It's an interview.
I mean, we'd have to go through the Crawford analysis to figure out if Ms. Lauber's statements were testimonial. Now, there's not a Crawford problem because she was on the stand.
Correct.
But whether these qualify as testimony with respect to the concern that providing transcripts of certain testimony would give that certain testimony undue weight when transcripts of other testimony are not provided That I have a genuine question about. So I'm not suggesting that you can't publish.
Sure.
I'm asking whether you have to publish but not admit. But she was in custody, she was being questioned by law enforcement officers. I think there's at least a reasonable question as to whether this would qualify as testimonial, quote unquote.
I think two things, Your Honor. In some measure, that's why the state moved to admit the entire shebang. But I appreciate the need for efficiency.
Right.
The second thought I have is, to the extent that the defense wants to further cross-examine Carmen Lauber on these, or Detective O'Driscoll or Detective Maynard, they're here. We can all recall them easily.
I agree. Yeah, no, I agree with all of that.
So that was Brad Bloodworth, Summit County prosecutor. On the defense's side, Kouri Richins' side, they're saying, adamantly opposed, that if you're going to admit the 100, you have to admit everything, all of the conversations. The judge is reluctant to do that, to admit a transcript of all these interviews, because the jurors are told to rely on their own memory. No other witness do they get a whole transcript to take back with them when they deliberate. So it could outweigh her testimony up here, because they can go back and read everything, versus none of the other witnesses that have it. So the judge is reluctant to do that. Here is what the defense argued.
During cross-examination, it's fully within our right to pick out portions of this interview to
But you
show.
can recall her, right?
I don't think that's our job to recall the state's star witness. They had her on the stand.
I just asked you a yes or no question. Would you start there for me?
Could we recall her? Yes, that is something that could be possibly
Okay.
done. I don't imagine what world a defense would do that. But
And correct me if I'm wrong, you had the transcripts when you cross-examined her, right?
yes, but so did they. And the appropriate way to do it would have been to try and rehabilitate her on redirect, which would have then given me a chance to go into other statements.
They sought
During
to,
cross.
and I limited their ability to put in the whole 900 pages.
That's not how you rehabilitate. You rehabilitate by asking questions. It's not by putting in an entire transcript.
Well, you
And-
can do it, for example, by admitting prior consistent statements. And so I just need you to stay focused on that rule for a moment. I know I'm interrupting you.
Yeah, you're.
I don't understand how you think they were supposed to admit prior consistent statements.
Through testimony.
That's not a prior consistent statement. The whole reason we have the prior consistent statement rule is because the testimony goes in a different direction. Or there's a charge of recent fabrication or undue influence. Then you have the prior statement come in as substantive evidence.
Only while she's on the stand. They didn't even attempt to question her about whether or not to pull out these portions to show, oh, look at, you weren't unduly influenced. Look at, you said this, is that correct, is that correct? That's how you would normally see this done. Then I could have cross-examined her. And I also want to point out that they have taken very small portions of this that leave out the portions of the interview where she is being influenced by statements of law enforcement. This makes it look like, I mean, they've cherry-picked what they want. And for example, I want to pull out the May 10th interview. I don't even understand why this would be coming in. All they've pulled out is a conversation between Ms. Whistler and Ms. Lauber, that Ms. Lauber is supposed to testify before the grand jury. That's going to open up a whole door of speculation and what happened. I don't see how that has anything to do with what we're even talking about. And as I go through the transcripts, it's very much just what the state wants the jury to hear. I mean, if we're going to do this, which I think is completely inappropriate, this is a Crawford problem. This should have been brought in through testimony when Carmen Lauber was on the stand, so she could have been cross-examined. They can bring in what they want through Detective O'Driscoll, because we still have an opportunity to cross-examine him. But to just send back portions of a transcript that we've not been allowed to cross-examine on, that point out to the jury just what they want the jury to hear, is inappropriate.
So the prosecution saying, 100 pages. Defense is saying, let it all in. Let the 1,000 pages in. If we have to sit here and play the tapes 7.5 hours, we will. That's what the defense wanted to do. The judge said, I don't know. I mean, the judge seemed really torn in all of this. There was much back and forth this morning about this. Judge took a recess. He came back and he ruled that, well, yeah, I guess I'll explain the ruling rather than playing it. Well, let me play it. Let me play a little bit of what the judge said, and then I'll talk about it.
I have considered carefully the authorities cited by defendant and the state. I've looked at the text of Rule 801. Ruling as a matter of law that, one, there's no Crawford problem here because Ms. Lauber testified in open court under oath, was cross-examined in open court under oath. It is the cross-examination of her regarding the conduct and circumstances in her prior interviews with law enforcement and other agencies that creates the circumstances providing the foundation for admission of her prior consistent statements under 801D1B. So the defendants further, the court is not persuaded that the only witness through whom a prior consistent statement may be admitted is the declarant witness that made the statement. The court has not seen any authority for that proposition. So to the extent the defendant objects to any of Ms. Lauber's prior consistent statements coming in any way, that objection is overruled.
So that's what the judge ruled. The prosecution could admit the 100 pages. The defense could then add to it if they wanted to, a little bit in the beginning and the end to give it maybe some context. And then the defense said, if that's your ruling, judge, we ask for, well, I'll play it. This is what they asked for.
We actually would move for a continuance because we need to go through all the 1,000 pages again and figure out what portions should be let in. If the court's not inclined to let all of it in, then, we don't have anyone in the cry room doing this for us. So we need time to do that. So we'd ask for a 2-day continuance.
2 days.
Yes.
Your request for a 2-day continuance is denied. I don't have a basis to use that much time of the jury when this motion was filed 2 days ago and I raised it with you yesterday morning.
Okay.
Your request for a 2-day continuance is denied.
Ask for a 1-day. Ask for 1 day.
All right, a 1-day continuance then.
To tomorrow morning.
Yes.
And what is it you're going to do between now and then?
I guess we're going to go through the whole transcript and find out what we want included under Rule 106.
And you're going to file something so I can read it?
Yeah.
Mr. Bloodworth.
Your Honor, the state objects. Not only did the state file the motion 2 days ago with the specific portions, this whole issue was teed up last week when Carmen Lauber testified. I don't think there were any surprises in the motion, and I think the state's motion and the redacted versions it filed were probably what everybody expected.
All right. And Ms. Lewis, you'd be filing something in writing that had additional either Rule 106 inclusions or some identification of where the state has over-designated things, correct?
Yes.
And your position would be that additional parts of the transcript should be shown to the jury, is that right?
Yes.
So they originally said we need 2 days to go through all of this. Meanwhile, the prosecution has a video editor in the back going through and cutting out of the 1,000 pages the clips they need. The judge ultimately said, yes, you can have one day, not two. You can have the rest of today, Tuesday, but come tomorrow at 8:30. We're going to go through it, and then the jurors will be here at 1. So that's what today probably, and he told the defense, I need something filed. I think he said by 6 o'clock, and they said, can we have until 11? He said, absolutely not, because I have to have a chance to read it, and the prosecution has a chance to read it and respond if they want. So all day today, the defense, the prosecution have been going through these jailhouse interviews with Carmen Lauber and the detectives before the detective takes the stand tomorrow. The state, as you heard there, has an issue because they're like, they've known about this. Like, why this isn't, we're not just springing this on them. They've known about it and they just haven't had time. Now, I'm not faulting the defense in any way. Maybe I am, I don't know. But these, obviously, when you're in the midst of this trial, you're working kind of focused on what's next, next witness, next this, next that. So I think they probably just didn't have a chance to get to it, and that's why the judge said we need to discuss it now. So we're going to talk about this in a minute more with Grace, and she can help you understand why it's important. So the judge recessed. The motions, the paperwork will get filed tonight. Tomorrow, we will likely get an advanced preview in the morning about what is in these jailhouse conversations. And then O'Driscoll will take the stand, presumably so, in the afternoon, and the jurors will get to hear these statements. The prosecution went so far as to say they've been trying to get a hold of Carmen Lauber to recall her to the stand through her attorney. If they recall her, then they could admit these interviews through her. Like, you said this, play. Yes, I did. You said this, play. Yes, I did. And then the jurors will have that for context. She's a key witness. Clearly, the prosecution says believes what she said matters because they're doing this for her ahead of the defense taking over. Because the prosecution could rest tomorrow, maybe Thursday. Honestly, I'm thinking it's going to be Thursday. Defense will probably take Thursday to prepare. Maybe they'll be ready with their first witness, or maybe they start Friday, maybe even Monday. I mean, I don't know. We'll see where it all goes. Just know that this trial has had some unexpected twists and turns, which is kind of the case in all trials. You got to be sure you do it right, and that's what's happening today. So that's what happened this morning. You can go back and watch that. Oh, and then we had one more witness, the cell phone expert. He came back on the stand and clarified the times on the timestamps of the texts. Remember how I was confused about this when we talked about the texts? And I'm glad that prosecution brought him back because he talked about UTC +7 +6. That's where Utah is in relation to the universal time zone. So they did adjust the times on the texts from the times we saw on the text were the time in Utah Utah when they were sent. So Utah during daylight savings is -6, and during other times of the year it's -7 because they jump ahead. So that's what he had to say when he was on the stand. He was on the stand for about 10 minutes today, and the defense didn't have any questions for him. So that's what happened today. I know several of you have questions. We're going to get to them, but before we get to that, I want to bring in my guest, Grace Wong, a personal friend of mine, a professional friend we met years ago with the Daybell case. She started at Court TV in the 90s. She has covered, name a high-profile case, she's been there. Casey Anthony, Jodi Arias, OJ's trial. I don't believe she was at the first one, but she's been to others. She has covered Saddam Hussein. She has been in courtrooms when history has unfolded. Derek Chauvin, all sorts of trials. She is a senior something or other at Court TV until tomorrow, because if you have not heard, Law and Crime has acquired Court TV. And as of tomorrow is Court TV's last day. They will still be on the air, just different format. And they'll still, just Law and Crime now owns them. They used to be competitors, now they are one. And unfortunately, Grace was not part of the merger. They phased out her position. I'm hoping that she can continue to find something, though, that is beneficial, and she's just so knowledgeable and is very, very connected. She is a person who will go into court and will be able to get cameras in there. The setup you see with this trial with Kouri Richins, That's her doing, working with the court and the staff, with the two cameras and the mics, making it sure it's a quality production. And so she's been in court every single second for this trial. She has not missed a second. And I wanted to bring her on to get her take on what she's observing in the courtroom with Kouri Richins, what she thinks about the defense, the prosecution, what happened today, and where she sees the trial going. So please welcome to Courtroom Insider, Grace Wong. Joining me now, Grace Wong. She is the courtroom master. That's what we can call you, Grace. How many trials do you think you've sat in over the course of your career?
Couple of hundred,
Hundreds
easily.
of trials. And you still enjoy it. You still like doing it.
I still love it. Yes. So different. Each one is so different. And, the players are different. The issues are different. And of course, the stories are very, very different, even though it's usually a murder trial.
What sticks out to you about this one, Kouri Richins' trial, that makes it a little different or unique?
I think because it's a young couple with a very young family, and they seem to have everything, right? A happy home, and they seem to have the means to have a good life. And she's accused of murder, and the irony is that she wrote a grief book to help her children, her young children, adjust to life without their father, and now she's accused of murdering him. And so that makes it very compelling, I think, for everybody, and that's why there's such high interest in this trial.
How do you think overall the prosecution is doing and the defense? You've been in that courtroom every second that the court has been in session. What's your take?
You know, there's a lot of evidence, but one thing that really sticks with me is that the defense has been really good at kind of showing with every witness, bringing in new information and kind of showing the other side, Kouri's side. And, that has been pretty effective in terms of neutralizing some of the prosecution's witnesses. And I think the defense is doing, it's a very robust defense, which always makes things interesting, and a lot of evidence against her, but an opportunity for the defense to challenge that evidence very effectively. And I think in the end, in a circumstantial case like this one, defense attorneys that are very skilled are very good at attacking each and every piece of evidence. But then at the very end, when the prosecution has time to stitch it all together, it does create a picture, a fuller picture. Instead of looking at each element by itself, you're looking at the full picture. And that I'm looking forward to seeing if the prosecution can effectively stitch together all these elements and present a very coherent picture of her guilt.
A lot of
How
our
much guilt?
viewers have said these defense attorneys are getting on my nerves, and they've even come up with nicknames for them. And they wonder that sometimes is the behavior of the defense attorneys, can that rub jurors the wrong way? Can jurors be like, okay, enough, this is getting too long, this is getting too much? Or do you think jurors see it as, well, they're just doing their job, that's what they have to do?
I think jurors take their oaths very seriously. And yes, there are some attorneys that might rub them the wrong way, but they're told at the end, if you don't like me, don't take it out on my client. And when I've interviewed jurors, they have taken that responsibility very seriously. And there are going to be certain witnesses and evidence that will resonate more with jurors, but ultimately it's going to be the evidence that they consider and not the personalities of the attorneys. However, there are some attorneys that have a very engaging style and tend to command the attention of the courtroom and jurors, and they really know how to speak their language. And I think, we do see that in a lot of trials. And I think here, the defense is doing its job, which is to hold the state's feet to the fire and challenge the evidence when they need it to challenge. And I'm looking forward to seeing what their case is going to be like.
A lot of people too have wondered about Kouri Richins herself. The days that I've been in court, she's pretty much how you see on television, not showing much emotion, The day that I was there, she was writing a bunch of post-it notes back and forth between her attorneys. She's consulting with them, helping them out. But otherwise, we haven't seen tears. We haven't seen smiles. We haven't seen anything like that. Unless I've missed it, Grace. What have you seen?
I have not seen tears or any overt emotion. I've seen her react to some of the testimony, but she hasn't, by and large, she has been very stoic and not been very expressive. And when I see her taking notes, sometimes I feel part of it is to avoid looking at the witness or betraying whatever emotion that she is feeling. She's focused on, I guess, whatever she's focused on so that she doesn't betray any kind of emotion or feelings. I think, I think that having that stoicism and there might be, some people have commented, well, she hasn't shown any emotion when we've heard some pretty dreadful things like the 911 call where she is emotional, or learning about Eric's death. She's been stoic. I think that's better than faking emotion. And I think jurors see that. They see through that if the emotion is not authentic. So having a very steady gaze or a steady appearance in terms of, her demeanor is better than crocodile tears.
And don't a lot of defense attorneys tell their clients don't show any emotion?
Yes, I think a lot of defense attorneys do say that so
Yeah.
that they're not improperly judged and that it doesn't, sway the jury one way or another.
One of the people who did show emotion was Robert Josh Grossman, the boyfriend. Described that afternoon in the courtroom. He actually didn't say much. He testified a little, but it was his text messages with Kouri that silence as the jurors read them. What were things like in there? Because clearly he felt, in my opinion, a little uncomfortable, awkward, started to cry, didn't really want to be there.
Yeah, I think you're right about all that. And it was very evident in his body language that he was very uncomfortable. He was fidgeting, he was putting his head down on the witness stand and tearful at times. And I thought what was really interesting was I think, obviously when they asked him, did you love her? And he revealed, that at one point they were in love with each other. He loved her. She expressed her love. And what struck me about their relationship wasn't so much, I mean, they were having an affair, but the text messages were very intense, very passionate, and revealed more romance than sex, if you know what I mean. It just seemed very intimate. And he said on the stand that they talked about things that you would talk about if you were best friends. And they certainly seemed to share that connection. So I was struck by that, that intensity of his emotion. And and I think there might still be lingering feelings for her, frankly, just based on how he reacted in the courtroom.
Mm.
And I don't think he wanted to. I think he wanted to tell the truth, and he said that. There was a moment before he took the stand where the judge had to, I wouldn't say had to admonish him that he has to tell the truth. And he said something like, well, I'm not going to lie. And so that was a moment that I thought kind of set the tone for his testimony. And I thought it was, I thought his testimony was very compelling and revealed so much more about their intimacy in the text and in his body language.
Yeah, you're right. I hadn't thought about that. There wasn't a lot of like graphic sexual conversation, sexting back and forth. It was more of he spelled out her name Kouri with things he loved about her. It was like they had this romantic relationship, and he seemed crushed by the whole thing and crushed that Eric had died, which was interesting to me because a lot of times you'd think a lover might be like, "Oh yeah, he's gone. This is my chance." But he said he was devastated, and then on the stand said that he was a phenomenal father.
Yes, and that's why I think it was so difficult for him because, you know, he said that it never occurred to him that anything intentional had happened to Eric. and certainly not by his lover, right? Not by Kouri. And you know, and then when I think it was very difficult for him to give that kind of testimony that would be, frankly, very damning, right? When she asks him if he ever killed anybody in Iraq. You know, why is she thinking that? Why is she talking about that? If not, perhaps, you know, if you believe the state, that she has a guilty conscience and that this is an expression of, you know, consciousness of guilt.
Was the defense able to poke enough holes in Carmen Lauber's testimony?
I thought her cross was very good. I thought it showed she couldn't remember so much. I mean, every question that they asked her, she couldn't remember, she couldn't recall, and she had to be reminded about, you know, just very basic details. And there were some very glaring inconsistencies. One of them being that she had said in a previous statement that she and Kouri exchanged drugs when she dropped them off. When she dropped them off at her house, right? That she left her the money and Lauber left the drugs. Whereas in her testimony, that first time she said they exchanged drugs and money in the driveway of her house. Now that's a really big difference. And then she, you know, and her recollection how many times she met with Crozier to buy the drugs was pretty you know, was inconsistent with what Robert Crozier said. But we have since seen testimony that corroborates Lauber's testimony, that there were more than once where she met Crozier based on um, uh, the cell phone evidence.
The cell
And
phone
of course,
track.
cell phone evidence is almost incontrovertible, right? I mean, you can't really challenge that. So I think her testimony, even though she was really shaky on the stand, and frankly, you know, her recollections were totally unreliable, the cell phone evidence kind of bore out what the state is advancing in terms of their theory.
And that kind of leads into my questions about today that many of our viewers have had. In the layman's terms, what happened this morning with Carmen Lauber, these jailhouse conversations that the defense said all or nothing, and then we'll play it all for 7 hours, went back and forth with the judge. Can you kind of explain what this all means and why court was ultimately canceled until tomorrow?
Well, the legal issue that was unresolved wasn't so much the Kouri's statement to police or the jail calls. That had been set aside and it was resolved. Where the big dispute is between the sides is Carmen Lauber's testimony. Because the cross of Carmen was very effective, the state wants to admit her prior statement to police. And that's a couple of interviews. That's 7.5 hours of interviews and 1,000 pages of transcript. And the state wanted initially to enter the whole thing into evidence and have the jury look at it if they had any questions about her testimony, because they feel that on the whole, she was consistent. And the problem with that is that the judge is very reluctant to send transcripts to the jury room when they're deliberating, because he's not going to do that for any other witness.
Right.
So what the state did was they shaved off of the 1,000 pages. They have now 100 or so pages that they want to publish through the testimony of Jeff O'Driscoll, the lead detective on this case. The problem with that is that the defense objects. They disagree that this is how it should come in, because they feel that it should have come in, if they wanted to admit this evidence, it should have come in when Carmen Lauber was testifying, because it's her statement, not O'Driscoll's statement. But O'Driscoll did the interviews, or some of the interviews. I mean, there were some interviews with a federal prosecutor. So that's where the lawyers disagree. But the judge has ruled, and the judge's ruling is that it can come in, and that he will give the defense a chance to review what is going to come in, and if they feel like they want to add to it from the transcripts itself, because the defense is saying that this is, you know, being cherry-picked by the prosecution, and they should have a chance to see what in that 1,000 pages should be admitted that would be helpful to the defense. And that's basically it in a nutshell.
And so why does the defense need more time?
Well, they haven't looked at the transcript in a long time. They feel like this is being sprung on them. And even though the state argued that it shouldn't delay the trial because this is a motion that was filed. The motion that was filed was that they wanted to admit this evidence, so they knew about this motion 2 days ago, and they had given them a heads up a week ago. So they knew this was coming down the pike, but they want that time because they feel like they need it to present, a fair defense. They feel like it would be unfair for them to have to go into this without having a clearer picture of what's going to be admitted in the transcript.
And the prosecutor, Brad Bloodworth, has said that they have Detective O'Driscoll to testify, maybe one or two other witnesses. So the state's case could be over maybe tomorrow or Thursday. What do you see the defense doing? I mean, will Kouri take the stand? Do they have a whole slate of witnesses you think they'll call, or will this be a couple days and then the jury gets it?
I think it's doubtful because we've already heard in court what the defense theory is, and they have some experts lined up. And I think one of those experts they mentioned was a drug expert to testify about illicit drugs. Their position is that Eric died as a result of accidental poisoning. And to advance that theory, I think they're going to call their own toxicologist and an expert on the drugs that he was taking. I think the state is going to have some more evidence to put in. I think O'Driscoll will be very lengthy because the transcript or the video of Carmen Lauber's statement to police is at least my estimate, based on the pages that they're saying it they have in terms of the transcript, is that alone is an hour and a half, and the jurors are only coming in at 1 o'clock. So that's 4 hours. 1.5 is going to be eaten by this Carmen Lauber statement, plus the jail calls, and then Kouri's statement. That's pretty. And then the defense is going to cross, and they've been pretty proactive about crossing each and every witness except for Chelsea
Gibson, not Gibson, the friend, right? Chelsea,
yeah, the friend.
Yeah.
Whose name escapes me right now. Barney, right?
Barney, yes.
Chelsea Barney.
Grace, we're so glad you're there. What do you foresee? You covered Casey Anthony, right?
Yes, I covered Casey Anthony.
And was that verdict a shocker?
I think so, but I understood the verdict because circumstantial cases, you really have to educate jurors about what circumstantial evidence is. And I think that, when, prosecutors do this for a long time, I think sometimes they leave out the educational component. I mean, not intentionally, of course, but I think you have to educate jurors on the importance of circumstantial evidence and how they should, incorporate their common sense in assessing circumstantial evidence. And this, it was a shocker, mainly because everybody was so invested in a guilty verdict, right? I mean, there was so much pre-publicity in the Casey Anthony case where you saw very, very incriminating evidence, like pictures of her dancing and smiling and laughing while her child is missing. And then you saw her in video, leading police down this path, basically lying to them. And her lies were like, her lies were so many. There was this volume of lies that you had to pick through. And so the picture of Casey Anthony, even before her trial, was extremely damning, extremely incriminating. But when it came down to it, they couldn't link the body to Casey Anthony. Like, it was inconclusive. They had examined the tape around the child's mouth, and there was no nexus between Casey Anthony and the body itself. And so you have to then, when there's no direct evidence, you have to look at the circumstantial evidence and the elements around what makes her guilty. And I felt like the prosecution didn't do an adequate job in terms of educating the jurors about circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of comparisons in our comments between Kouri Richins and Casey Anthony. Maybe that's just her appearance, how they look, but also other people speculating that that this is a circumstantial case, and they feel like the prosecution hasn't tied it all together. But their portion of the trial isn't over. They still have a few more days.
Correct. But I think the weakest part of their case is they haven't ruled out voluntary ingestion by Eric.
Mm.
There's no nexus between Kouri and the fentanyl. And that is going to be, I think, that has to be a leap that the jurors are going to have to make. That even though there's no fentanyl in all those searches of the house, and we heard the private investigator, charge over $100,000 to the family and encouraging, law enforcement to go back to the house to search. And there were so many avenues that were left where they couldn't rule it out, right? They didn't search the trucks, so they can't rule out that there was something in there that could have connected Kouri to the crime. They didn't test the bottle. So there are things that I think, could make it difficult without that nexus for jurors to make the leap. But we'll see. I mean, like I said, most circumstantial cases, all depends on how well the prosecution can stitch together all those elements and make it a very clear picture for the jury.
And that's one reason you like being in the courtroom. All these years and all these trials.
Correct.
Well, I have to tell everybody, Grace has been so wonderful to work with the past 6-7 years since Daybell and Chris Tapp, all these stories. She's always so helpful to us at East Idaho News, and there's nobody better in all the business who sits through these court cases. And weren't you in the beginning, early days of Court TV too, Grace? Back, they went off and then they came back on. Were you there from the beginning?
Well, I was there from the early 90s.
Early 90s.
Yeah, early 90s. And, a lot of cases like the OJ armed robbery case I did, Jodi Arias, Casey Anthony, Chauvin. So a lot of very high profile cases that turned into real flashpoints for the country. So it's been a real pleasure working at Court TV. So we'll have to see what my next adventure is.
Well, let's hope that you're still in courtrooms.
Thanks, Nate.
Big thanks to Grace. Always enjoy talking with her. She is such an asset to the journalism community and to the court community. So I look forward to seeing where she ends up and having her hopefully on Courtroom Insider again in the future. All right, we have some questions coming in from you, I should say. Let me pull these up. By the way, if you have any questions, put them in the comments, please. I would love to hear them from you. Nate, I follow you for reporting not your very distinct opinions. Can you report, or are you only able to editorialize? Do I think she did it? Yes. Do I think she is despicable? Yes. But I am an observer, not a journalist. Well, thank you for your feedback. I don't think I've shared my opinions. I maybe on a couple things here and there, but I'm just bringing you the facts every night. That's my goal. If I've waded into the opinion, I'm not an opinion guy. I'm a news guy. I try to present both sides and be fair and accurate. Do I make it 100% of the time? No. I know that I misstep here and there, but I've just tried to bring you the facts. And I hope I'm not editorializing. If anything, I hope I'm explaining things so that you understand them. And that's what I am. So I appreciate your feedback, but I don't know if I agree with your assessment. I apologize if that's the way that it comes off. Can witnesses bring notes that detail dates and other important information and use them in their testimony? Some witnesses, well, I think all witnesses are allowed to take notes. They bring them to the stand. They cannot read from them. They can use them in many cases to refresh their memory. So they could ask the prosecutor, like, I didn't write it down, or I don't recall, but I have it in my notes. Do you mind if I confer? It has to be from their memory, and it has to be their personal experiences. That's why, when they get called up, especially the experts, they're allowed. I don't know. The rules may be different for lay witnesses. Those of you who are attorneys who are watching can let me know. But a lot of times, lay witnesses, it's solely based on your memory, what you recall. Nate, can you explain to us how come they will not read the text aloud in court? I get this asked this every day. It's because the prosecutor Brad Bloodworth does not want them read. I asked him about that. He said that he would rather have the jurors read them on the screen, and then they're all admitted into evidence. So when they go back and deliberate, they can read them in there. Was the investigator in an accident? Why was he in a neck brace? Yes, well, not an accident. He had surgery and his spine was fused. A lot of comments about the investigator, both sides. Some of you loved him, some of you didn't like him. I think over 1,000 comments on my Facebook page. So interesting to hear your feedback. I appreciate those of you who did chime in. Is there a list of witnesses that the defense plans to call, and is that made public? There is a list, but we don't have it. It's a sealed list, much like the prosecution. They haven't released the list. We don't know who's going to be called, other than the judge will sometimes say who's on deck for tomorrow, what's happening. Some prosecutors will release the witness list ahead of time. In some states, it's required, I believe. Some states, like in Utah, Idaho, they don't have to. So we don't really know how many they'll call. We'll see. Can you explain what the walk the dog letter is and what day will it be admitted into court? Good question. Sounds like that's going to be coming in tomorrow. The walk the dog letter, I did a whole YouTube video about it. You can go back and watch it if you want. And it's on our YouTube channel. And it's all about this letter that Kouri wrote to her mom, brother. The prosecution says she was telling them, coaching them on what to say and how to testify. And I won't say much more, but we have the letter. You can go watch it. Watch the Dog East Idaho News. And tomorrow at this time, we'll probably be talking about it, assuming it's brought into Lieutenant Detective O'Driscoll's testimony. Can the jury see the defendant? Yes, they can. Yep, she's very visible. All the jurors should have a good view of her, except maybe the ones on the end. I still think they should be able to. Definitely the ones on the door when you walk in the courtroom, the juror door, they have a perfect view of her. And I would say at least 80% of them have a perfect view. There might be some of them on the end that might not be able to see her unless they kind of leaned over. Great questions. Nate, a few months ago, you talked about getting a new mattress. I have horrible back pain. I got one of the mattresses, the Twinkle beds. Thank you for the referral. I've never slept better. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's from Julie in Minnesota. Julie, I'm glad you like it. She's talking about Twinkle beds. They've been a great partner with me. They sell incredible mattresses. In fact, last night, Erica said, "Do you notice a difference with our bed?" I'm like, "No." She had flipped the mattress, which they say to do, and it still felt perfectly fine. In fact, we got all the kids' Twinkle beds. So if you're looking for a mattress and you use the promo code Eaton, Eaton, you get 30% off all year long. You can use that promo code, everything on their website, including the cooling sheets and the cooling pillow, which has changed my life. When I was in Park City last week and I had to go to sleep in the hotel, I could not get cool. In fact, I'm going to bring that pillow with me every time I travel. Now that you know my sleep habits, there you go. Everybody, thanks so much for being here. So great to see you here on Courtroom Insider. We'll be back tomorrow. Court will be back in. Here's the schedule. 8:15 we'll start. 8:30 the live stream begins. I'll be posting live updates written on our East Idaho News website, eastidahonews.com, along with my X feed. And then we'll be back here tomorrow night for Courtroom Insider. Here's where you can find me: Facebook, Insta, X, and YouTube. Again, please subscribe if you haven't. Really appreciate all of your support through all of this as we approach maybe the end of the trial, or at least the halfway point. Hope you found it interesting. Hope that these Courtroom Insiders, that you've enjoyed them. And I just thank you very much for watching. Thanks to Grace Wong for being here. And we will see you all tomorrow. Have a good night.